Route 66, known as America's Main Street, a symbol of freedom, adventure, and opportunity. But for African Americans, the journey came with a different reality. A reality where freedom required planning, courage, and faith. This is the story of those who traveled not just miles, but barriers. Guided by hope and a little green book.
Welcome, everyone, to the show Guided by Courage, Our Journey on Route 66 and Traveling. First of all, who I have in studio are three amazing ladies. I am so excited to share with you about them as well as their story. So what I like to do, even though we're going to be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be talking about just really mentioning the Green Book, as well as just traveling. Now, all of us, including myself, we really are products of the Green Book, and I will go into more details about the Green Book. But without any further ado, I'd love to introduce you to these amazing ladies that I have in studio. And I'm going to start over to my left.
Joyce Wilson.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And then
Betty Brown.
Thank you so much, Betty. And
H. Benet Bird.
Hi, my name is Sheila Spicer-Batiste.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I first shared with you about the Green Book. And I'm going to put this up and show this is what the original book looked like, but this is not. This is a replica of the Green Book. And then, let's see, how did it go here? Yeah. And then I'm going to show you here. This. And then it went on to how it is. Okay? So, what the Green Book actually shared with people of color at that time, like this, the Green Book originally was called the Negro Motorist Green Book. And that was actually showing us where we can, as we were traveling, where we could go eat, where we can go get gas, and where we could stay, all along the route of Route 66, as well as other places. So I just wanted to give a little backstory on that. And so without any further ado, I have just a few questions for our beautiful ladies that we have here in studio. And first question I would like to ask is, what are your earliest memories of traveling? Just traveling, period.
Well, my earliest memory of traveling was, I think it was 49, maybe 50. We took the train from Arkansas, Camden, Arkansas, to Chicago, Illinois. And the train was like, you have a very small place to sit. And the dining room was off limits. And then they had a lounge area where you could sit and just see where you're going. And that was like off limits. We just mostly had to sit in this little small area. Mm-hmm. And I know that we couldn't have the food from the cafeteria and couldn't sit in the dining room. Mm-hmm. But my mother did. She was a coffee person. The conductor or whoever, captain, whoever he was, he would bring her a cup of coffee when she needed it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else remember their earliest days of traveling?
My earliest days traveling was from Arkansas to Gary, Indiana. And we traveled by car. Mm-hmm. And we traveled to, where was Uncle Franklin live?
Gary.
No, we traveled to Missouri.
Oh, okay.
We traveled to
St.
Missouri,
Louis.
and we spent the night there. Mm-hmm. And we left there, and we traveled to Gary, Indiana. and I lived there 5 years.
Okay.
And then my next travel was to California.
Okay.
So we traveled by bus, the Greyhound, and my daughter was very small, and well, she was probably about 5 or 6 at the time. And when I got on the bus, well, I only had a very little money, so I had packed some sandwiches so we could have on the bus. So I wanted to make sure she had something to eat. And but in the meantime, when they cleaned off the bus, they threw my bag away. So I didn't. But God is good. It was a young lady on the bus. She had been to visit her husband. He was in the service, and she was going back home. And so she said my little girl looked so much like her little girl, and she wanted if she could stay with her. So I told her, I said, well, I have to. She said, I'm taking care of everything. So anyway, she got off the bus somewhere near where we was getting off the bus. So she took care of Freddie all the way from Chicago all the way to where she got off the bus. And then we didn't have to eat no more until we was in Monrovia. And my father and my uncle was at the bus station waiting for us. So all I can say is God is good.
Okay, so
Well, what I remember about my earliest travel, I was 10 years old. And I had family, brothers, sister in Gary, Indiana. So they came home to Arkansas. And I went back with them. I spent a year there and went to school there. That was my earliest. And then my next travel, I believe, was Southern Baptist College in Little Rock, Arkansas, because that's where I'm from. And from Little Rock, when that school year ended, it was California. Yeah. My brother lived in Los Angeles, so he brought my father and my to California. He worked, sent back for his children and my mom. Yeah. So, but we've done so much traveling since then to many different states and places.
So my earliest memories of traveling Route 66 would be probably around the age of 8, I would say. My parents and my brother and sister were all born and raised in Mississippi, and they migrated here in the 50s. I was born in 61. And so I remember, again, they migrated here, my parents did, so that they can make a better living for the family, provide for the family. And so I was born and raised here, but my brother and sister were born in Mississippi, as well as my parents. So they would travel back to home to Mississippi, than what they called home. Every few years they would travel back. I remember maybe early as about 8 years old, traveling back with them to Mississippi. So we would prepare the car. There was no flying back. Everybody drove. Any other family that we knew drove back that way. So of course we would have to take Route 66 most of the way to Mississippi to arrive there. We would prepare by my mother would fry up a bunch of chicken, wrap it up in aluminum foil in a pan. Any other kind of food, sandwiches that she could prepare for us that would last the trip, because there were some stops, but minimal stops when we were on our way. So we would prepare for that. We'd get our clothes, blankets, and so forth to the clothes, of course, to have when we get there, and the blankets so that we could sleep in the car. So we would travel, and of course, I'm in the back just um, sleeping a lot of times and eating. But I remember the travels to Mississippi. We would stop occasionally to we would stop occasionally to use the bathroom or to get something, but really the eating portion that we did was the food that we brought. I remember the stops where we would stop, and just to keep in mind, the stops were minimal. Um, it was a thing to try to get there, as quickly as you could with minimal stops. And so I remember some of the stops where we would stop at a rest stop, and everybody would go to sleep for a little bit, but we'd continue on our way. But I would imagine these were stops that my parents knew. I didn't know at the time that were something that was familiar to them, where they felt safe to stop at the time. I remember a certain, and I think it's just because they had these milkshakes that they had. It was a little business called Stuckey's, where we would stop there, and there were many along the way when we traveled, and so we would stop occasionally, and I'm sure it was for monetary reasons as well. We weren't buying a lot of things because, of course, I don't think my parents could afford it. But we would stop and splurge and get a milkshake at Stuckey. So that stood out in my mind when we would travel. Later on, as I got older, some of the things that happened I remembered more so when I was a young teenager. I remember when my mother didn't always want to go because she didn't really like the experience when she was in Mississippi. But she would go, and we would go, and she wasn't really happy about it all the time because she just didn't like she had really traumatic experiences when she was growing up, so she didn't particularly want to go back. My dad loved the South and always wanted to go back to visit, so we would go back. Um, so we traveled, and we would go back to Mississippi to visit, and we would see her relatives as well as my dad. Funny that she was the one that didn't want to go back, but we were actually going to see a lot of her relatives when we went back to visit. And we would go back, and some of the experiences that we had too. I know that we're talking more Route 66, but I was just thinking of one of the things that stood out when I was there was that I know when along the way in when we got to Mississippi, we were told, and I remember this more so as a teenager, that we couldn't stop in any of the little stores that had the Confederate flag flying, that we weren't welcome there. So I knew that, and that stood out in my mind. As I was, of course, learning in school about history, it made me sad that that was still happening, and that was still happening when I was a teenager. Imagining what I'm feeling right now with things that are going on. But that was happening when I was a teenager. It also made me feel like I would never want to live in that area, being that I was born and raised in California, and those type of things didn't happen here so far as you're not being able to go in certain businesses. So those are some of my earlier memories. Of course, we continued our journeys to along Route 66 and to Mississippi because my dad eventually, my mom and dad divorced when I was a late teenager. And so my dad moved back to Mississippi, and so we would actually go more often than to visit him each year.
With your travels, this is for all of you, were there any challenges that you and your family faced during those times of your travel?
Well, I remember New Mexico. I don't remember too much about the traveling. I wasn't ready to come to California, so I wasn't too pleasant with my mom. But I remember New Mexico, they wouldn't let us have food. We came on the bus, the Greyhound, and they wouldn't let us have food, so we had to wait outside until the bus take off again. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I remember traveling by car to from California. Was going to Arkansas, and we stopped at a couple of. I stopped at a little burger place to get a sandwich, something to eat, and they did say that okay, we don't supposed to serve you, but we will make it to you. But you take the food and be on your way. So we got the food, and we drove off to a rest stop and had ate. Either ate in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we traveled to Arkansas, but before we was, my husband and I, we had been to Las Vegas, and we was on our way back home. And at that time, only the people of color could only go in certain places in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So, and on our way back home, we was running pretty low in gas. But normally, he never let it get lower than a half a tank. And
That must be a thing. That's the way my daddy was. He would say, I'm out of gas. I'm gonna run out of gas, and it's half a tank of gas. I wish that stuck with me, because I would run it all the way.
We do it now.
So,
half a tank.
He had a half a tank. So we stopped at a service station to get some gas, and she said, I can't sell you no gas." He said, "You mean to tell me you can't sell me any gas?" And she said, "No." And he said, I don't remember what else he said, but he said something else, and she said, "I can't do that either." I know that was what she said. So anyway, it upset him, but we went on our way.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, he said, if I'd have been running out of gas, he said she would have given me some gas, or I would have took it. But I'm glad he had a half a tank. So on our travels to Arkansas, there was never a minute's problem. We carried food so we wouldn't have to stop. And I would drive by day, and he would drive by night. And so we never had any problem anywhere going from California to Arkansas.
Well, it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say? Okay, I apologize for that. That is actually, like I stated earlier, a part of just something that was handed down to us from generation to generation. Is the reason why we make sure we carry food in case there's places that we can't stop at, or they're refusing to serve us.
This was happening like 2 years ago. We was traveling, and we stopped for gas and to use the bathroom, and they charged $1 each to use the bathroom. So one person was going to pay $1 and use the bathroom, hold the door open for the next person. And she said, "No, you can't do that. Each person have to pay $1." So my nephew was getting gas. So his wife went out and said, "Michael, you cannot buy no gas here. If we each have to pay $1 for the bathroom, we don't need no gas." So we didn't use the bathroom, and we didn't get the gas. So it's still going on. Whatever purchases is alive and well.
Yeah. That yes, for sure.
Some of the challenges is, like I said, some of those stores that we couldn't visit, and we knew that we couldn't visit because they flew the flag. Some of the other challenges were there were outward signs of racism that I didn't necessarily see in California, where certain folks didn't want to talk to you, or they gave you a certain look, and you knew that. But then on the other hand, you would also have that Southern hospitality where folks were very friendly. Even with some of my older relatives that were there, like a certain aunt that I had, where some of the white folks that were there were very friendly with her because she worked for them. And so they were very friendly with her. But on the other hand, you would see that the very obvious racism from some of the other folks that were there. And also, some of the stories that we heard from some of the people that lived there, they still warned of areas where they couldn't drive at night. And so that was disturbing to me as well.
For many, the road was uncertain. Every stop required awareness. Every mile carried both risk and resilience.
Did you ever feel that there was places that you knew you couldn't stop at? Or
Sure.
okay,
Even here,
yeah,
Woolworth, we couldn't order any food
yeah.
at their counter.
Yeah.
And that's right here in Monrovia at that, as a matter of fact. So you just go ahead on. I know that a lot of people just don't understand and they don't know any better, so you just chop it off as air, maybe. My husband would say, when you learn to do better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
And until you can learn and understand, you can't do better. And a lot of times we don't do better.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people don't realize that we didn't make ourselves. God made us.
Amen.
He put the hair and the color and everything on us, but he also gave us a choice to choose. Who are we going to love? So my dad taught us to go on about your business. Don't bother anybody. Be good to everybody that you meet, but they're not going to be good to you. Everybody is not going to be good, but you just ignore it and go head on. I don't need to put myself in their shoes. The ones, because see, I know a lot of people, all different races. They're good people in all different, all races. So that's what my dad taught us. Don't look up. No, don't look down. Keep your head high and go head on. And I think maybe that's a good rule to go by. I could look you straight in your eyes and say what I want to say. But I would hope that it would be uplifting and good things.
Well, the Lord says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house, there are many mansions. So I know when I get to my Father's house, I won't have to worry about who to talk to or who not to talk to or whatever we should do. And because he said, love ye one another as I have loved you. And that's what I stand on.
Yeah.
I think I learned later about the Green Book because I said, when we first were traveling, I was very young. And my parents didn't share those conversations with me. But now that I look back, I know that those are the reasons why they did certain things that they did, like pack up, so that we didn't have to stop to eat certain places. And I know part of it was probably, budget-wise, they couldn't do it either. But I know that they were very cautious about that, I'm sure, for those reasons. And also when they stopped to rest, they had to be very cautious of where they stop so they feel safe. I remember my mom in one particular trip that we had being very, I would say I would describe it now as being paranoid because we were asleep in the car and she really couldn't sleep. She could not sleep because it was dark and, we were at a rest stop and she kept, saying, "Are we ready to go? Can we go now?" It was like we had barely been there 30 minutes. There wasn't even any time to rest. My brother was helping to drive at the time, and he just said, let's just keep driving because she was very nervous about stopping. And I would say that as well, when we would get there, some of the traumatic experiences that she had really kind of freaked her out when we were there because it was still very dark. My parents lived in a very rural area there. They still don't have streetlights, and so it's extremely dark. And she was just freaking out, like it's so dark here, and I could just see that almost terror in her face, and just to think about some of the things that she experienced, which she later shared with me, and I understand what that fear was coming from.
Now, while traveling, was there any time that you felt that there was actually a safety issue on traveling?
Not that I remember. If there was any, we didn't know it, or I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, my husband and I mean, he didn't know either how I felt. But coming from Miami, on our way back to California, man, it's some dark places.
Oh, yes.
And they're frightening. If you let your mind wander.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some very dark places, and sometimes I would be afraid.
Yeah.
You know, if anything happened, don't have no blowout.
Yeah.
Don't run out of gas.
Yes.
Today, I fill my tank every half a tank. I do not get on the highway or the streets without a half a tank of gas.
Like I said, my daddy, that was his thing, and it didn't stick with me, but there was a couple of times I go, I should have listened to Daddy, and it really truly makes total sense. Total.
Well, you kind of get used to it and you kind of don't. You just wonder where the people's hearts at in this late time. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, leaving Indiana, going back to Arkansas, because in Indiana, we know everything that's there, but it's not quite as bad as some of the more southern states. So I wouldn't say yes, sir. See, it wasn't yes, sir, or no, sir. It's yasum and nawsum. And even the smallest kid, you'd have to say, yes, sir. But not me. I went into an ice cream parlor in Smackover, Arkansas, and we was all ordering ice cream, but I was ordering for my sisters because I'm the one from Gary. So anyway, I don't know, the guy said, did you say vanilla? I said, yes. He said to me, yes? You're talking about a 16, 15-year-old kid. And I said yes. So I was the rebellious one.
And I could definitely see that. That's why I love you.
But I don't, when people say things that hurts, most of the time I try not to say nothing because the Bible said keep a bridle on your tongue. He said he would fight my battles if I keep still. So I try to keep still. Sometimes I can't. But like I said, I was the rebellious one. My oldest brother, he's 105 years old last month in February. And he said, I don't know how you got away with so much stuff. You always did talk back when you was a little baby kid. So, and
God was taking care of you.
I one of these questions I have, and I feel redundant even asking you ladies, but I'm gonna say it, and I'm probably gonna answer it myself, but in this way, the question is, what helped you keep going despite the challenges? And sitting here, listening to you all, because you all are coming from a space of true faith and strong faith. And that is what I feel that got you all through the different challenges and things that you went through. I mean, that's just my observation, but you certainly can answer that question.
Well, God said, I'll fight your battle.
Yes.
So I'm a living witness.
Well, one reason that helped you to get through those things was you understood what was going on back there. I mean, you knew it from the time you was very young, how different things were. So you just had to just like, if they did it, you just kind of like ignore it or just go head on, because if you didn't talk back, and so except Renee and so well, but anyway, you just kind of like knew when to speak and when not to speak. So.
by the way, that was my husband's first cousin, James Bird. I don't know if you heard about that, being dragged by the truck. And
No way.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
yeah, that was him. James.
And that hadn't been that long ago.
I know.
Yes.
It's been probably about 20-some years.
It ain't been 20. I don't think it's been 20.
Yeah.
It has been time passed
at
so
least,
fast.
I know it. I know. But yeah, it has at least been 20 years. So that's a
So
real.
if you,
Go ahead.
excuse me,
No, go ahead.
if you don't do as you told, some of these people will just let it go, but a lot won't. Your life is on the line, especially the men's and the boys. But we got along okay. We got a lot of interracial family members. In fact, we were just at one Saturday. So we love people, and that's what our Father taught us, to love everybody. Don't hate no one. And then the Bible tells us that.
Yeah.
So that's a good rule. I don't hate anybody. If I could help, I will. I won't pass you by. I do have this one incident, and I almost got in a lot of trouble about it. This little white boy came riding by our house on a horse. A horse had gotten out, and he was running, trying to catch the horse. But he was a long ways from home, and it was hot weather. My parents was on their jobs. My grandmother was home. Now that was a mean lady. The little boy, he probably wasn't any older than 9 or 10, riding that big horse and looking for this other one. He asked me, he saw me in the yard, if he could have a glass of water. Oh, sure. I'll give you a glass of cold water. I went in to get the water, brought it out to the kid, was reaching it to him. My grandmother stepped out and said, what are you going to do with that water? He's not getting no water. Pour it out, and you get. My dad got on his mom when I told him, and me. He said, "You override her. This better not ever happen again." Now that's the way we was taught. So you see, it's not just one race. It's all mixed there together. We all have our faults.
Amen.
You know,
Yeah.
It's good in every race, and it's not so good in every race.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Satan is going to
That's
be
why
out.
we're taught to love
Yeah.
and not hate
Yeah.
and do good.
Well, since you're speaking of incidents, I had I think he's probably my third brother. He had got little odd jobs and saved his money to buy. He wanted a bicycle, so he had saved his money and went to buy the bicycle. He bought the bicycle, and on his way home, he stopped in the store, and he bought himself ice cream, a popsicle, and
5 cents.
And when he got in line to pay for the popsicle, as each time a white person come through, he had to step back and let them go first. So it happened so many times until the popsicle began to melt. So after it began to melt, then he began to eat it. So when she finally decided to wait on him, he had just a stick. So she said, okay, that's okay. You don't have to pay for it. That's okay. It's okay. And he looked around. There was police, and they arrested him for say he stole a popsicle. So I mean, little incidents like that that they would just do to you. But so he was about what, 15 to 16. So he went to jail, and he stayed about maybe a few hours. Someone told my dad, and so he and my brother went and got him, and he was so happy but he was really happy that he got his bicycle. So things just happen in the South.
Yeah.
Not just in the South.
No, like I
all
say,
over the
everywhere,
United
because we
States.
wasn't in the South when they didn't let us use the bathroom.
Well, I was on my way to El Money one day, and we had just got a new car. And the police was sitting, you know how they sit on the side. They used to. I don't think they do it now.
Yeah, they do.
They sit on the side, and I knew the light was there. I mean, I knew the stop sign was there. And I can't remember if I did or didn't. Apparently, I did stop, but, I started through. And when I looked and saw him on the side, I hit my brakes. And when I come to a stop, I was in the middle of the highway, in the middle of the street. And he asked me, whose car is this? I said, mine's and my husband. So he said, you know what? He said, you've had scare enough because you didn't know that stop sign. I knew it was there. He said, you didn't know that stop sign was there, but when you saw it, you was trying to stop, and you couldn't stop. He said, I'm going to let you go this time. He had my driver's license.
Yeah.
Because when I come to the stop in the middle of the street, and he started up his car, I just pulled my license out, and when he walked up, I handed them to him. So he said, well, you've had scare enough. So I'm not going to give you a ticket this time. He said, but I sit on this corner quite a bit. He said, and if you run the stop sign again, he said, I know you know it's there.
Yeah.
I
Well,
said, thank you,
yeah.
Chimley.
Well, we're almost coming to a close here, ladies, and so I just want to kind of do a recap on with traveling, and I too would actually like to share a little bit. I know that for us, as a young child, when we traveled, we made sure my mom, made sure that everything was packed. We had enough food and everything like that. And the number one thing for us, and even looking back, reading some of the information about um, uh, uh, blacks traveling, is they always had fried chicken, and the reason for that is that it stayed well and it was health. I mean, a nice
Filling.
protein and filling, yes. And so you always had this ice chest,
Right.
and then see back then, you bought the blocks of ice. And so I remember my mom would cook either, and another thing was that reading, and also with me remembering on our travels, we always left at night. And it said that because children were asleep, and so you could travel further. Something, I didn't understand, but it was just easier to travel because at night you had these at least 12 hours before it was daylight, so you had enough space in between
Get a
before
little
the
distance.
they got good distance before you had to experience having to stop and all these other things that come into play traveling. And actually, you shared when we talked on the phone that even using the restroom, that
We carried something.
yeah, so that you wouldn't have to share that.
Right. Oh. Well,
then we can
like I
wrap
said,
it
my
up.
daughter was young.
Uh-huh.
And so we always had to carry something because, you couldn't always stop. You wasn't always at a place you could stop her. So for her to use it and then, throw it out the window.
Yeah.
Throw it, well, he would
It's
stop
up, yeah,
long enough
yeah.
and pull it out.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to stop at restroom.
In closing, what message would you like to give to young people on their travels?
Well, me, I'm always, willing to be quiet, listen, and say, for instance, like the policeman, I knew that, I knew the stop sign was there. He didn't know that I know it was there. What I was really doing was speeding. And so he was nice, and he said to
The
me,
young people.
huh?
The young people.
He was nice, and he said, well, now I know I know you know it's here, and I often sit here. So I feel like that he was nice enough to let me go and not give me a ticket.
Okay, thank you. Anything like you would like to share?
It's not easy so much to be, but I would like to say to the young people to be obedient, treat everybody the way you would like to be treated, study hard, make Jesus the head of your life.
Amen.
That's it.
Thank you.
Well, no, I don't really have anything to say. They have just about said it all. But for them to try to always be kind and obey the rules, follow the rules.
Amen.
That's it.
To share with the future generations, when you think about history, you think that it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. And when people make that statement that you need to learn your history so that you don't repeat it, that is so true. We need to really learn that history, learn the impact that it has on today. I did not share earlier on that one of the times that we were traveling, we actually, and I was just shocked because this is another thing where You think young folks today were thinking, oh, that was years ago. So when we were traveling, of course, I had heard of the Ku Klux Klan, but in my mind, I'm thinking, that was years ago. We actually, traveling on the highway, ran into a Ku Klux Klan like rally or whatever it was, because they were out fully hooded, like going through, like walking almost through traffic, trying to hand out pamphlets. Of course, they didn't want to hand it out to us, but that was a wake-up call to me that this is still alive and well. And so I say that to say, I say to young folks, your history is very, very important. Research Route 66, the Green Book, anything that you can get your hands on, that you realize that once you read it, you realize that it has a lasting effect on you, even today.
And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you ladies for coming out and sharing your story. And I personally feel very honored to be in your presence. And
You're honored to be asked.
and knowing that I knew both of you, that I've seen you both before, and so I really, really appreciate that. And
You haven't seen me?
no, but yes. And
I just want to tell you, I love everybody. Everybody. But I kid around a lot, so don't pay me no mind.
And I love that about you. And another thing that makes this really special for me is that see, my mother passed when I was 18 years old. So whenever I'm around ladies like you, just remind me of being around my mom. And I cherish that moment. I honor that moment, that I get a chance to be in the presence of ladies like you. And I respect you so much, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I really, that's really what I wanted also to say to you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'll say just have a blessed day, and I hope this Roots 100 years be a success.
Yes, yes. I believe it will. I believe it will. Lots of thoughts and everything has gone into what we're doing. So on that note, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have a blessed day.
Yeah.
They traveled roads that did not always welcome them, yet they moved forward, with courage, with dignity, with grace. Because the journey was never just about the destination, it was about claiming the right to move, to live, to be. And because of them, the road is wider for all of us today.